All right, let's get to those classical civilizations. Okay, so let's talk about Greece and Rome. And if you want me to talk about other classical civilizations like Persia or Maurya or Han, let me know in the comments section below. Anyway, the classical period is roughly between 800 BCE and 400 CE. And during this time, Greece and Rome were not the only two civilizations out there. But it is called the classical period because these are the two civilizations that we tend to focus on when we study world history. Because their contributions to things like philosophy and government and art and architecture and all that stuff have had an enduring legacy for Western civilization. Okay, so we're talking about Greece and Rome. But there were lots of other civilizations doing their thing at the same time. Let's start with Greece, because you can't have classical without Greece. So the ancient Greeks began as a collection of independent cities: Athens, Sparta, Thebes, Corinth, and dozens more. But over time, the geography of Greece forced them to become more unified. You see, Greece is a peninsula surrounded by the Mediterranean Sea. To the north was a big mountain range that divided the various Greek city-states from one another. To the east and west were more seas, which made naval power super important. And then to the south was Egypt and the eastern Mediterranean, which was a hotbed for cultural and economic exchange. So due to their geography, the Greeks took to the seas. And by controlling the seas, the Delian League, led by Athens, became a powerful force in the region. Meanwhile, Sparta was over here on the Peloponnese being all, we hate our neighbors. Then, after the Persian Wars, where the Greeks beat back the mighty Persian Empire, everyone was like, whoa, we can take on anyone. And then they proceeded to do that thing that humans always do, where they go, I am strong. Let me flex my power. And so they went to war. It was called the Peloponnesian War. And it was basically Athens versus Sparta and their respective allies. And it ended up being a real bummer because neither side could decisively win. But it left Greece weakened and vulnerable. And then Macedonia came in and conquered everyone. And then Alexander the Great came in and conquered even more people. And then after he died, his empire broke up into 3 pieces and Greece entered into a period of decline. Meanwhile, Rome is over here minding its own business, doing Roman stuff. And the Greeks are like, hey, great art, great architecture, great ideas. And Rome is like, I can do those things too. And then they proceed to do those things better than the Greeks did. The Romans adapted the Greek alphabet to their own language. They developed their own system of law. They built roads and aqueducts and public buildings that were bigger and fancier than anything the Greeks had ever dreamed of. And they even built a dome. Like the Greeks never even built a dome. And you got a dome. And then the Romans started taking over the Mediterranean. They fought several Punic wars against Carthage and they won. And then they fought lots of other wars against lots of other people and they kept winning. And then they got so good at fighting wars that they essentially conquered the entire Mediterranean world. And then they kept fighting wars and they expanded their empire until it stretched from Spain to Mesopotamia. And then the civil wars broke out. And then Augustus came and fixed everything and ushered in the Pax Romana, which was 200 years of peace and prosperity. But then after that, everything started falling apart. The economy declined. There were lots of natural disasters. And then outside invaders started poking around. And then Rome got sacked a few times, and then it burned down, and then it got sacked again, and then it fell. Meanwhile, back in Greece, Alexander the Great was hanging out with some friends, and they were like, man, wouldn't it be cool if there was a universal language that everyone in the world spoke so that we could understand each other better? And then Aristotle was like, yeah, but that will never happen. And then they all sat in silence for a moment, and then Alexander the Great said, you know what would be cool? If we had a giant library with all the books from all the civilizations in the world. And then Aristotle was like, yeah, but that will never happen. And then Alexander the Great said, you know what else would be cool? If we spread Greek culture across the whole dang world. And then Aristotle was like, yeah, but that will never happen. And then they all sat in silence for a moment, and then they were like, let's make that happen. And so they did. Next time, we're going to talk about Persia, Mauryan, and Han. So let me know if you're interested in that.